Admittedly, today's episode is not the most exciting episode, but it's a really important one. So we'll get some music playing in the background and I'll do my best to make this as entertaining as possible for you. Hey everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name's Matt, and what I'm going to talk about today is the differences between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA. Now, there are some key differences between these two, and I'm hoping at the end of them that you'll have a good idea as to which is which and what's going to be the best option for you. Now, to make this a little bit easier, what I did is made a Venn diagram that'll be popping up on the screen so you can kind of follow along and know where we are in this process, just comparing the differences and the similarities between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA. One thing I didn't include in there because I thought it was pretty basic, but is something that's worth just saying, is a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA are different accounts. They're not the same, so you can't have a traditional Roth IRA or a Roth traditional IRA. They're treated completely separately, and again, it's something that might seem pretty obvious, but it was a question that I received a lot when I was working in finances. You know, people would be looking for their traditional Roth IRA, and it doesn't exist. So if you have questions on that, please let me know, and I'll happily clarify that for you. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this. All right, so the first similarity that we have, and we'll start with the similarities between these, and then we'll separate their differences, is they're both retirement accounts. So these are both accounts that you should be using to save with a long-term approach. I believe you should be doing that with every account that you have, but these are accounts that are specifically going to be set up for your retirement. You can argue people use Roth IRAs in a little bit different ways than just retirement. That's where it gets a little complicated, but at its core, the IRA stands for an individual retirement account. So I guess one thing I didn't include in here in the similarities is these are both held individually. You and your wife, your significant other, your brother, sister, anything like that cannot share an IRA. So they're not a joint account and there'll never be two owners on them. There can only be one owner for each of these accounts. The next similarity between these two accounts are their contribution limits. So I'm filming this in 2020, and as of now, the contribution limits for these accounts is $6,000 for each account if you're under the age of 50. And if you're over the age of 50, you get a little bit of a boost and you can contribute up to $7,000. Anything you contribute over that would be an excess contribution. So bear that in mind when you're putting money away in these accounts. That doesn't include any growth in the account. So if you put in as much as you can and it grows or exceeds that contribution limit, that's fine. This is just new money that's being put directly into the account. And kind of the last similarity between these is that these are all tax advantaged accounts. Basically what that means is these are accounts that you don't have to worry about paying capital gains in the accounts. So that's again what makes them more of a long-term play, maybe more than something like an individual or just a regular investment account. But also since they have a tax advantage, it just means that you should maybe pay a little extra attention to what you're investing in. So that way you're not kind of double dipping in the tax advantage, if that makes sense. I'll use municipal bonds as an example. Since that's already a tax advantaged investment, you wouldn't want to put that into a retirement account. You can, there's nothing stopping you, but it's just you're gonna really miss out on those opportunities of having that kind of tax advantage investment if the account itself already has the tax advantage. So bear that in mind as well with the investments. I know that might be a little deep in the weeds for some people, but again, if you have any questions on that, please let me know. And again, maybe something else I didn't include on this Venn diagram here, but is the investments you could put in these accounts are very similar as well. For the most part, they're going to be held with stocks, bonds, ETFs, and mutual funds. Cash is another example, but it's not really something that you'll see. You can hold like real estate in them. It's a weird gray area with that, but ultimately the investments that you could put in these accounts are similar, but the Roth itself or the traditional itself is not the investment. That's just basically like I don't like the phrase, but that's just basically the type of basket that's holding the investments. All right, so we'll start with the traditional IRA for what makes that different or what are the differences with the traditional IRA. And the very first one or the biggest one is a traditional IRA is made of pre-tax money. So this is money that you have not yet paid taxes on that you're putting into this account. So the best way I can describe this, and this is something that unfortunately I've seen happen before, is if you're employed, so you're not self-employed, you're a W-2 employee that has an actual employer that pays your paycheck. If they already take taxes out before that money hits your account or before you receive that check, that is now after-tax money. So that money does not belong in a traditional IRA. Unfortunately, nothing's really stopping you from putting that money into a traditional IRA, so pay close attention to when you receive a check from an employer if that money has already had taxes taken out of it. If it hasn't, you're good to go for putting it into a traditional IRA, or you could kind of set it up with where you set up these accounts so that they can pull out the money before taxes are paid. But you don't want to put money in this account that you've already paid taxes on, because when you start taking money out of the account, you'll ultimately end up paying those taxes again. The next difference is what I call the 59.5 rule. That's not the real name for it, but it was the best way I can describe it to make it easy. So with traditional IRAs, when you put the money in the account, you can't withdraw it until you're 59.5. And I guess I should say that you can withdraw the money, but you'll have to pay a 10% penalty unless it's like a certain circumstance kind of thing. And on top of that, you'll have to pay taxes on those distributions. So anytime you take money out of this account, since it hasn't been taxed already, you'll pay ordinary income tax on that. And again, if you're under the age of 59.5, you'll also have that additional 10% penalty. So this really is not an account that you should put money into if you're not in a comfortable position financially and think you might need immediate access to these funds, or need access to these funds before you're that age of 59.5. And lastly, the difference with a traditional IRA from a Roth IRA is a traditional IRA has what we call RMDs, which simply stands for Required Minimum Distributions. Now, these won't take place until you're the age 70.5, but basically what happens is that year you turn 70.5, you will have a set amount that the IRS requires for you to take out of the account, or else again, you'll have to pay a penalty. Reason being is, as I would always explain to people, Uncle Sam at the end of the day is always going to get his cut. Since this money hasn't been taxed yet, Uncle Sam hasn't received his cut. And if you're 70.5 and not taking the money out, the IRS is essentially going to force you to take that money out so they can collect that tax money. Now, you don't have to worry about capital gains again because this is a tax advantage account, but you will be forced to take that money out. And it's really just a calculation based on the value of your account versus your life expectancy. It's a pretty simple formula, but not really one worth getting into today. And that will determine how much you will need to take out. So I don't think many people watching this are over 70.5, but bear that in mind if you are, because that is something you'll have to start doing, as well as also if you're collecting Social Security. Just understand how taking both of those out at the same time could affect your tax bracket. All right, so next we'll move on here to the Roth IRA. So the Roth is post-tax money. So really, again, most of the people out there, if you're a W-2 employee, when you receive your check, the money's already been taxed. So you're free just to put that into a Roth IRA, and then that way it grows. And when you have to take the money out of the account, since you've already paid taxes on it, you don't have to pay taxes again, as well as you don't have to pay those capital gains on it. So, it's really a good way for using that money, and then that way when you're in retirement, you won't have to worry about distributions and how is that going to throw off your tax bracket, since this is all tax-free money. Now, one of the downfalls though to a Roth IRA is that they are not necessarily available for high income earners. So in 2020, if your adjusted gross income is more than $124,000 a year, then you are not officially allowed to make contributions to a Roth IRA. There is a kind of workaround called a backdoor IRA or a Roth conversion, if that's, if you are one of those high income earners. Again, not something that for the sake of this video I feel is important, but bear that in mind. If you make over $124,000 a year, you can't make direct contributions to a Roth IRA. If you're under that $124,000 a year, you can make those contributions, but again, you're going to be capped at $6,000 if you're under 50 or $7,000 if you're over 50. And lastly, we have the 5-year rule. So distributions in regards to Roth IRAs are treated a little bit different than traditional IRAs, and they're more complicated. Just again, since this is already post-tax money and they're really a great tax advantage for you as the investor, the IRS is a little wonky, for lack of a better phrase. So with that being said, this is a great time to say, speak to an accountant if you have major questions on this. But the 5-year rule basically states as long as you've had your Roth IRA for over 5 years, you could take out that money without paying any penalty, regardless of your age. Now, that being said, if you do need to withdraw the money before that you've had the account open for 5 years, then you can withdraw your contributions, but you cannot withdraw your earnings. So again, just to make that simply put, if you need access to your funds, you maxed out last year's contributions, you put in $6,000. Today the account's at $8,000 and you need to take out some money, you can withdraw $6,000 without worrying about a penalty. But if you go $6,001 or anything over than what you've contributed, then that is where you will have to pay a penalty on that money. So I hope that you found this video helpful. Again, it's a pretty quick video, but I always see a lot of information about these accounts and I see a lot of questions that get asked about these. So it's just something that's worth going over and, giving you some information or giving you my context about it. So if you have any questions for me, as always, please leave them in the comment section down below. If you found this video helpful, you might want to consider subscribing. I like to make these videos pretty often, so I'm always just putting out as much information as I can. And if you learned something, I hope that you'd consider liking this video. As always, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're right here with me, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for your time today. Please be safe out there, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you Wednesday for our next Watchlist Wednesday.